What do you think of when you hear the phrase, "Are you real?" Back in the 1970s, 60s, and 70s when I grew up, there was songs out about people not being real, and they were called plastic people. They were unreal. It was a big thing to be real, to be genuine, to be authentic. And I find that there are some things that in different stages of life, it's just the same for every generation. And for those that are just out of high school into college, maybe into their mid-20s, being authentic and being real is very important to that stage of life. It was for my generation. I remember in the late 90s when within the church there was a phrase called postmodern to describe folks at that time, and authenticity was very, very important to those that were in their early to mid-20s. It just was, and so on. So I want to talk about being real today, and I'm going to read from the Spirit Described the Journey, what I journaled regarding that, and then we'll unpack my thoughts about it. Being real. John chapter 11, verse 35. Jesus wept. How is it that people always want to know how much is the doggy in the window? I've never heard anyone ask, who is the doggy in the window? Does the doggy really care? I suspect all the doggy is concerned about is getting out of the window. I've been awake about 27 hours now. I feel raggedly frazzled. There's a hunger in my soul to weep. Not cry, weep. The kind of weeping that is deep, reaching to the very depths of who I am, touching that part of me that is real and tangible in an intangible way. That part of me that does not seem real until it is touched. Then it is very real. Then it isn't. You just remember it is there because once it was. The kind of weeping that cleanses and loosens the soul from the filth of life, the way a summer rain washes the dirt from the leaves on trees, leaving them looking crisper and greener, and the air tasting more live, clean, and good. How far away is too close? Is the perception I have of my depth of being known as real as I think, or have I allowed myself to be deceived into believing that what I allow others to see is real, rather than chipping away at the paint which covers the facade I struggle to emerge from? Is it possible to be real with God if I cannot be real with people? The Apostle John stated, "How can I love God whom I have not seen if I do not love people who I have seen?" Can this principle be applied across the board? Why does confessing the true nature of my soul cut to the quick much more sharply with people than when I am alone with God? Why is it so hard to reveal the hidden things with people than with God? Being real with people is being real. I got involved at my church looking for people to be real with. I am still searching. One thing I have discovered, I do not want to be real with people who do not love me. If all they want is to fix me or figure me out, then it seems to defeat the whole purpose. It merely bears witness that they have not known me, that they have not known me. Perfect love casts out fear. I am still afraid to be known, but why am I afraid to love? That verse from Luke is a very interesting verse. It says Jesus wept, and the context of that, it's in the middle of a story. It's not just some random verse. Jesus had the friends Mary and Martha and Lazarus, and Lazarus got very sick, and Mary and Martha sent someone to find Jesus and to tell him that Lazarus was very sick and they needed him to come. And they found Jesus and told Jesus, and he said, okay, I'll come. And they left to go back and tell them. And then Jesus waited. And his disciples were like, are you not going to go? And he's like, well, we need to wait. And they're like, well, they told you that Lazarus, was dying. And Jesus said, it's okay. He's going to go to sleep. It's okay. And so he waits a bit, and then he travels to Mary and Martha and Lazarus' home. And as he's approaching, they tell them, tell Martha that Jesus is there. And she comes out to Jesus and she says, Lord, had you been here, my brother wouldn't have died, right? And Jesus, is in the midst of all of these people mourning the death of Lazarus. And Jesus said that, I told you, if you only believe, wouldn't you, that you would see the works of God, right? And everything. And she says, well, my brother's dead. She said, if you'd been here, he wouldn't die. And Jesus said, Martha, he will rise again. And she said, I know in the last age that he will rise again in the resurrection and stuff. And Jesus said the most incredible thing. He looked at Martha and he said, I am the resurrection. Jesus said that he was the way, the truth, and the life, and he is the resurrection. The resurrection is where we receive his life. And then they went and told Mary, and Mary came rushing out, and she came and fell at the feet of Jesus. She said, Lord, if you'd been here, my brother wouldn't have died. And then it says, Jesus wept. In that moment, when I think about what it means to be real, in that moment, Jesus empathized with Mary. He entered into her pain with her. Now, Jesus is aware of all of the pain of humanity, right? And there's places in Scripture where it says, moved with compassion, Jesus chose to do this or do that. A lot of times Jesus didn't do things for people, and sometimes they had to kind of, bug him to get him to do stuff. But in this instance, Jesus is present with Mary, and he feels her grief himself, and he weeps with her. I sometimes wonder, there's not a lot of description at times in the stories, and I wonder if Jesus knelt down to Mary as she was kneeling on the ground and put his forehead against her head, just came together and just wept together. Man, there is power in weeping with someone. Not just weeping in their presence, but weeping with them, entering into that pain, that sorrow with them. They identify with that. They feel that you identify with where they're at. And most of the time when we're in a place of grief and pain, what we need is to know that we're not alone in that grief or pain, that others are experiencing that grief and pain also. Jesus wept. Jesus was real. In this entry that I read here, I talked about the need to release, the need to weep. And I really, I remember writing that. I remember the day that I wrote it. And I remember, I had been awake for a long time. I worked a third shift job, and quite often I would end up being awake for a day and a half sometimes, because I would flip-flop back and forth between working third shift and being a daytime person, I'd go into work typically at 10 o'clock, whatever job I had, and work till 6 or 8 o'clock in the morning. And I'd do that 3 or 4 days, and then I would be off for a few days. When I worked at Kinko's, I'd work 4, be off 3, and when I'd get off on my last day, I'd stay awake until the evening of the next day, and I'd go to bed like I was a daytime person, and I'd live daytime. And then when I went back to work on Monday night, I would be awake all day Monday, and I'd work all night Monday night, and then go home and sleep and stuff. And that wears on you emotionally. But there was other stuff going on in my soul. I had been experiencing woundedness at the hands of others. I was trying to connect with people, trying to have friends, and I just needed to grieve and weep what was happening. Have you ever felt that way? And have you ever felt not like crying, but that, that there's just, you need to weep. You need that gut-wrenching weeping that we're all afraid to do. We hate the feeling, but sometimes we just need it. Scientists and doctors, they have examined tear ducts and they've examined tears, and they have found when tears are produced when someone is doing that deeper weeping and stuff, they find that there is chemicals being released through the eyes, through those tears. It's like a cleansing of the soul. And so sometimes we all need to do that. This one spot in here I wrote, is it possible to be real with God if I cannot be real with people? And I think that's one of the most important questions that I'm asking today. It was one of the most important questions I asked when I wrote this. Ask this of myself. And I recognized, I can go into my prayer closet, I can go to an isolated place, and I can open up my heart to God, and I can pray, and I can tell him how I'm feeling. I can be real with him. I've had times where I've been foot stomping mad with God, and I've cursed at him and spoken very, very, angrily at God. Told him what I thought in no uncertain terms. And I found that God's big enough to take that. I mean, he didn't run away and tell me that, okay, you're out of here. It's not like a human relationship that, you could lose it. God's relationship with me, his side of that is not dependent upon who I am. It's dependent upon who he is. He's in relationship with me. He loves me, not because of who I am and what he can get out of the relationship. He just loves me. And he gives me relationship because he just loves me. Whether I love him back or not is irrelevant. He loves me whether I love him back or not. That's that unconditional love people talk about. Doesn't mean that he doesn't deal with my stuff. As I go through this, you're going to find there are times where God deals with my stuff, where he gets in my junk, right? But other times, he just lets me be who I am when I'm being who I am. Just as husbands and wives do. They just roll their eyes. Okay, there they go again. God anticipates everything I'm going to do. I'm like a 2-year-old to God. You ever been around 2-year-old kids? They're predictable, aren't they? You know that a 2-year-old kid is going to pick stuff up and throw it. They just do. They're going to pick stuff up and put it in their mouth. They're going to try to climb up on the stuff they shouldn't climb up on. They're going to swoop across the coffee table and knock stuff off. They're just going to be a 2-year-old kid, right? They're just going to do what a 2-year-old does. And to God, I'm no different than a 2-year-old. He anticipates me that much. He understands where I'm at in life, what is normal, what to expect from me. And I can't hide any of that from him. But I can hide it from people. And I don't understand why it's so hard for me to sit down with people and tell them what's real in my life when it's so easy to tell God. Somehow it's more real with people. Chuck Swindoll, he's got a story he told once in a book called, I think it was called Improving Your Serve or something. But anyway, he tells a story about a little girl, and her mommy puts her to bed and tucks her in, says her prayers with her and stuff, and then the mommy goes to bed, and 10 or 15 minutes later, the little girl says, "Mommy," and mommy says, "Yes, honey," and she says, "I'm scared. Can you come back in here with me?" And he says, her mother, wanting to teach her a spiritual lesson, says, "Well, honey, you pray for Jesus' presence to come and be with you, and he will." And a few minutes later, the little girl says, "Mommy, I want somebody with skin on." When we deal with people with skin on, it's so much more challenging to do life than when we deal with just God. And I experience God's presence. I've had some very incredible experiences with God's presence. But somehow things just seem more real with other people than it does with God. When I start telling people what's real with me, when you get to a place where you can tell people about your sin, where you can confess the truth about how you're living, thoughts you've had, the desires you've had, it just seems more real. So today we're talking about being real. I hope you're getting something out of this, that you're resonating with it. And for me, the life change that I had to deal with as God started doing this with me, and He's taken me through a lot of life change, I had to learn how to let my guard down with other people. I'm not somebody that wants to weep in other people's presence. When I'm grieving, I want to withdraw from people to let that grief out. It's so hard for me to let that grief out in the presence of other people. I don't want to be vulnerable. I don't want them to be able to touch me on the inside. Man, it's hard. So I want to plant a seed in your mind. We need relationships where we can be real with people, where we can get past the surface of talking about the weather or the sports team or the grocery deals or, what we see on the news about politics and different things. We need to be able to talk about what's real in our lives with people. And we need people we can trust. We don't just want anybody now. I've learned in my journey, you can do this with anybody, but you shouldn't do it with just anybody. And so the next step is simply to be willing to go to God and say, I need community. I need deep community, real community, where people can know me, where I can be fully known, where I can let down my guard, where I can let people see the good, the bad, and the ugly about me. And doing that with people that will accept my truth, will accept this reality of who I am, with a heart towards seeing God work in me to deliver me from the things I need delivered from, to heal me of the things I need to be healed from, to deal with my stuff, right? We need that. And that happens best in community. God told me once He was going to heal me of something in my soul. He showed me I had this vision of a heart, like, a Valentine's heart that looked three-dimensional and stuff. And there was a white root sticking out of it. So if this is the heart, there was like this big white root sticking out of it. And God told me that He was going to remove that root. And it was one of those times where I was like, okay, just go ahead and do it, God. And He said, no, I'm not going to do it right now. And I'm like, but why not? And He said, well, I haven't gathered together yet those who I want to observe me doing it. I was like, God, what are you talking about, man? I don't want to do it with other people. And He's like, no, I need other people present. And it, I had pain in my heart. And I'm like, wait a minute, God. I've been wounded by people. People are the reason that you need to remove this from my heart. And now you're telling me that you want to gather together people to watch you doing this? And God said, yeah. He said, I understand that people did this to you, but you have to understand that community, being with other people, is part of the way that I deliver you from it. And I've learned that people loving on me is like a salve that you put on an open wound that helps to clean it, helps it to heal, helps to eliminate some of the pain. So pray for God to give you community, genuine community, community where you can trust the people you're in community with and they can trust you. So this is John Pearson with Be For Eternity. Glad you stopped by today. And I just want to ask you to go and bless God and bless others. Amen.